Up to now, we've used the WoodRat with the guide rails in place, working square. But for dovetailing, we need to reconfigure the machine because we'll be needing to cut not only straight, but also at the dovetail angles. The WoodRat makes dovetails in a totally different way than a dovetail jig. You'll have noticed that there's no talk of guide bushes anywhere. It just does not have them. With the guide bush in the way of the cutter, you're just cutting blind. The guidance, on the other hand, of the router is by the edge of the plate, not by any collar around the cutter. The cuts are positioned by the position of the spirals and of the center plate, leaving a clear view of the cut. When making dovetails with a router, the cutter cuts the socket, and that shapes the pin, and the form and the look of the dovetail pin depend absolutely on the elegance of the cutter. Whereas the industry has almost entirely gone over to tungsten carbide tipped or TCT cutters, the WoodRat is alone in recommending high-speed steel bits. We make no apology for this. If you're looking for a slim and elegant dovetail pin, you don't want chunky cutting edges welded to the structural shaft of your bit, even if they do never need sharpening. Here's the difference with the cutters. The first cut is WoodRat's DC5. It'll cut up to 32 millimeters deep, even with the smaller router. The second cut is with a TCT cutter with a larger width across the base, but notice that it only cuts 25 millimeters deep. The third cut is nearly 25 millimeters deep with WoodRat's DC4, but compare how slim the cut is. You'll find that the only manufacturer making a full range of exactly graded cutters that come close to matching classic hand-cut dovetails is WoodRat. And we have special fine dovetail cutters for draw fronts too. Although high-speed steel bits may get dull, they are so easy to sharpen, it's like sharpening a pencil. Don't let me give you the wrong impression here. You will need tungsten tipped cutters for cutting man-made boards, MDF, and some silicious hardwoods. And no, you don't have to use WoodRat cutters for dovetails. There's no law on it. You can use any dovetail cutter you like with the WoodRat, knowing that you can always make pins to fit the tail sockets. Now let's get down to business. Let's put these four pieces together in a ring. They're cut and they're squared of course on the WoodRat, and mark them up with triangles so you can know what goes where and never go wrong. The end pieces take the pins, and the long pieces, the sides, take the tails. And you match the cutter to the end piece. Choose the smallest bit that you have that'll go through the wood. Too small, too large, just right. Exactly right for this wood thickness. Place the bit. The dovetail starts with a test stick. From a squarish section, I've bandsawed off a thin slat, leaving a thicker part. Take the thin piece. Zero the cutter onto the top of it, and using the end piece, depth the router by putting the piece underneath the depthing foot, between the depthing foot and the base. And now, as you push that away, drop the cutter, it will be depthed exactly the thickness of your end. So cut the socket in the middle of the test stick and transfer it to the marker position over here on the left. Now with a sharp pencil, draw the size and the shape of the socket, and hence the picture of the bit itself, onto the face of the machine. We call that the mark. Before you move anything, take the thick part of the stick and put it up under the bit. Move the router back, raise the wood a fraction and recam it. Now bring the router forward, cutting a groove in the top of the stick. The groove is, of course, exactly the same width as the bottom of the cutter. Now we're all set up, the test stick is all set, we'll use that later. And we are ready to cut the tails. The two sides go under the plate in cutter position there, and one of the ends on the left in marker position. The main benefit of having no guide bush is that there's no template. There's nothing to go out and have to buy every time you need a new spacing or a new joint. You get complete freedom, and all you need in order to place a joint is a pencil mark. So you can mark it out where you want. But if you want it nicely ordered, we have the parallelogram. And that works by squashing or expanding so that you can get 6, 5, 4, probably 5 is best for this. You get a visual reference. And a mark here, each side of the bars, will give you the position of your joints. Drop that down and place it under there. There we go. So that's the first position, second position, and so on. When you've finished all the tail sockets right through the project, you make one cutter change back to a straight bit. Which one to use? There are no rules. You just use the bigger the better, because as long as it's through between the sockets, between the pins, then you're fine. Now we open up the spirals to router, and we have two variables, the position of the button in the center plate and the angle of the spirals. Where do we put them? Now you'll be pleased to know that you can place the button without using any mathematics. Get the button position from the chart. We're using a DC3 there, and the 1/2" cut is already in the chuck. So we have a button position of 74 and a spiral position of 54. 74 for the button, 54 for the spirals. We can check this by placing the cutting edge of the straight bit against the edge of the groove on either side. Now that we have the tail sockets all regular along the top of the board, we can use them to template the pins. And since we have an actual physical object to work from, we can have total accuracy. These two fold together. Pin position number 1. Cut a right-hand cut. There's no left here. Now track to the next pin position with number 2 socket against the mark. Cut a right and a left. get to the next pin position, P3, cut a right and then a left, and so on. The next pin, the last pin, has only a left-hand cut. Repeat for all 4 corners. Our little chest of drawers here shows the smallest WoodRat dovetail drawer front, and the drawer itself is fitting into the largest dovetail that we do. And so that must be the widest range of dovetail for any dovetailer in existence. Here are the prepared pieces. The front is selected for its decorative quality, and it's thick enough to take any veneer, moulding or inlay or decoration, and the contents will try and hammer the joints apart over the years, so we need nice deep dovetails in the sides. The wood of the sides is traditionally light and quite thin. Unlike some jigs, the WoodRat has no difficulty with this thinness, nor how closely you space the pins. Do the front tails first, then the back tails. With your cutting gauge, gauge the depth of the tails and transfer that depth onto the end of the drawer fronts. Place the larger Allen key in the center plate with the star knob in place. Now cut the drawer front pins in the same way as for through dovetails, but as you come forward to the scribed line, tighten the knob. Now you can cut the pins using the drawer side with tails as a template as usual. When all are done, the drawer fronts are stacked up together in the vise and the rounded corners nipped out with a skew chisel. This is quite easy, as the line of the cut is given by the scribed line and the edge of the pins. Now you can plough the grooves for the bottom. And thickness the drawer bottom if necessary. And there we have a classic handmade drawer, all ready for gluing up. You can see from all this that the WoodRat covers all the basic elements of joinery and cabinet making. Frames and panel doors and carcassing and shelving and boxes and trays and drawers. It all started with an idea, and the idea developed far beyond where we ever dreamed it could go. And in the nature of these things, one idea uncovers a new idea, and so it's a never-ending process. There's no limit to what you can do. Contact us today by fax, phone, email, or even writing. Buy the machine and get stuck in, and then we can all take the art further. There's lots more for us to tell, and we have lots more to learn from each other.